Some of the numbers I thought were pretty interesting from that, saying, well, guess what? Your account is worth this, and that's each individual person's account. Times that times your entire company's, well, the numbers can kind of get pretty pricey, can't they?
Yeah, they really, really can. And the thing to keep in mind is it's not necessarily that every email is valuable, because a lot of emails are just, hey, look at that, here's a joke or whatever. But we've had customers who have, for instance, had contract disputes. They can't find the old email where they sort of had an add-on to the contract, and it might be several hundred, or in one case it was several $1,000s. And the person was a Backupify customer. They came back, they retrieved the email, and sort of showed the guy, hey, see, look, we agreed to this. So it can actually be a good return on investment, given the value of data that individuals and corporations have.
How important is it to have that backup in place, though? Because that's the one thing I think people sometimes forget, because it's not necessarily, well, the whole entire system can crash. It's, someone just happened to be in accounting and presses delete, right?
Yeah, so people who are not in IT sometimes, don't understand the difference between sort of backup and restore versus disaster recovery versus archiving, and the different sort of flavors of, putting your data in a second location. But what really happens when you move to the cloud is you rely on the cloud provider for their disaster recovery capabilities, which protect them from their disasters. So, a storm or a data center outage, they can recover that data. It doesn't protect you from your own disasters. So Mary in accounting accidentally deletes a file. Somebody installs a new app on their iPhone that's supposed to sync their calendar or their contacts, and that app has a bug, and the sync deletes everything across all platforms. How can you get that back?
So talk about some of the trends that are actually taking place right now across the industry from your perspective. I mean, I know we talked a little bit briefly beforehand. Kind of speak to that a little bit more.
Yeah, so cloud adoption is going crazy, and one of the things that you're seeing both in the Google Apps space but also in the broader cloud space is larger and larger companies are moving to the cloud. This is happening because they've resisted it because they've had their own architecture, their own on-premise servers that they've had to depreciate, that they've been running things on, and so every 6 months they're making build versus buy decisions. Invest in more servers and more hardware, or move to the cloud. So that's the biggest trend I see, is sort of enterprise cloud adoption right now.
So from your perspective, because one thing I think is interesting, from our perspective, just take us, video, it's huge. Obviously, we have to pay a big, pretty penny if we want to have that much space available.
Yeah.
Talk about backing up our needs. Do we say, okay, we actually have to go out and purchase that much space to save it in different locations? Talk to that a little bit more.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Part of it depends on how much data you have, right, and the type of data. So for video, you're probably still heavily constrained by, local backup options, or some backup option that's tied to the servers where the video is stored, because even using a tool like a Carbonite or Mozy, something to back up a PC or a server that would upload that data remotely to the cloud, is really going to be bandwidth constrained. So EMC and similar companies still have a big business with on-premise backup. Yeah, and they will for a while, right? It's the trade-off, right? But the thing we talk about all the time that's interesting is you have this falling cost of data storage. So, hey, it's the per gig price is cheaper and cheaper, but you have this explosion in data that people are creating. And so we look for our own pricing all the time. How do we price that? How much are people going to store, and what's the crossover? Are they changing at the same rate? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting thing to actually look at and actually figure out the metrics behind it. That's going to be a nightmare, to be totally honest with you. I'm sure it is. So one thing I want to focus in on right now and ask you this, I talk about from our perspective, obviously being all video, but the need to back up, kind of some of the smaller everyday files, like email, because that's something that's, sometimes flies under the radar. Just a conversation, like you said, a contract dispute, might be a little bit bigger. That's something that you back up. But even everyday email that you might have just having back and forth with someone, that's a necessity, especially if it happens to be a client, right?
It is, and I've even used our product myself, right? We've had, every month I send, we're venture capital backed, and every month I send an email to all my investors about the things that we've done, and it's something I usually work on over a period of days. And the last one I was working on just vanished, and I don't know what happened. This was actually just 2 months ago, and I had to go into Backupify and retrieve that email, which saved me about probably 2 hours worth of work, to get that email back.